to very good um, evening, students. Today we're going to talk about parts of speech. So as I am speaking, you can refer to the PowerPoint that I've sent through iFolio. I'm not able to put the slide as in another screen. So I'm just going to talk from the PowerPoint. Yeah. So as we have said, parts of speech is a way of categorizing words, and it enables us to group words into types of words based on their properties. And I've asked you to actually do some work in groups to look at these various properties. But because of the circumstances, I think I will do the lecture first, and then you can videotape your group in presenting um, the group work. Okay, so I'm just gonna proceed with the lecture, and then you can send in your video, and then we can discuss it further either in iFolio or in the next lecture. So why is it important to have parts of speech? Because there's so many words that we use every day, and it is important for us to know how many of verbs that we use versus nouns versus adjectives versus preposition. For normal, typically developing kids, it is important to know, and it's so much more important to know for children with communication disorders, because the lack of use of certain words would indicate some difficulty in using language. Okay, so the second on the slide, the second purpose is, once we know the parts of speech, we can make comparisons between, like I said just now, that's, for example, it has been found that for some children, they use more nouns and verbs at the beginning of their language use. For example, when they are between 1 year 6 months to 2 years, for example. So in some languages that they have researched on, they found that Chinese, for example, Chinese children tend to use more verbs. In a unpublished research that has been done on Malay kids, they found that kids are using more nouns than verbs. Why is this so? So we can make some comparison. We can do a study which looks at probable reasons why this is so. And then we also can use this to parts of speech to explain why is it that they're having difficulty with verbs rather than nouns. As we know, nouns are used for labeling, so it's a pretty basic skill that children with communication disorders have the ability to name. That's the basic skill that they have. And why is it that it's difficult for verbs? Because verbs are more complex, you know. When you use verbs, of course you can use only verbs in, for example, in commands like go out, pick that tissue, you know. You can use verbs, but it's very limited. Ordinarily, when we use verbs, it is mostly together with the nouns and the adjectives, preposition, and stuff. So when people want to use verbs, they need to have the necessary lexical or vocabulary, necessary subcategorization framework in their mind in order to use efficiently the verbs. Okay, so that's the reason why. So we go on to the second slide, actually the third slide, because the first slide is the title page. In this slide, this actually in this slide, I have actually taken this newspaper cutting or news piece from the newspaper online, and it's about a group of women in Kampung Pasir Gajah Cukai who are turning their hobbies into activities to save endangered terrapins from extinction. So this is a conservation effort. Yeah. So if you look at the PowerPoint, it starts with Kemaman, a group of 10 women in Kampung Pasir Gajah Cukai is turning their hobbies into activities to save endangered terrapins from extinction. So in that piece, I've actually highlighted bold the noun phrases, the nouns and the noun phrases. So for example, a group of 10 women is a noun phrase. Kampung Pasir Gajah is a noun phrase, which is Kampung Pasir Gajah is a proper noun, is a name of a place. Cukai is a proper noun, is the name of a state in a district in a state. And then you can find that endangered terrapins, also a noun. Next, the Terrapin Conservation Project, also a noun. Local men. Turtle Awareness Programs, also noun phrase. The Community Empowerment Program is also a noun. Lotion and soap for sale, also a noun. Sewing classes, also a noun. A small portion of the money is also a noun. The Terrapin and Turtle Observation Project. Okay, so those highlighted are what we call nouns. So we want to look at when do they appear. So I've given, for the next slide, I've given you a table which has the example of the noun phrases, and then the elements occurring with the noun phrase and their distribution. So when we talk about parts of speech, we are always looking into elements, their neighbors, their neighbors, element neighbors occurring with that word, a noun, for example, and in what syntactic environment, distribution. So when we go back, so in this table, I've taken the examples from the newspaper piece and analyze it. So I could say a group of 10 women is a noun. The noun is woman, right? The noun is woman. And then what happens with the noun? So I have classified determiner. Is a determiner, group is classifier, numeral, preposition of, numeral, and noun. So that is the what occurs with the noun is the determiner, classifier, preposition, and numeral. And then what is the distribution? It always occurs in a noun phrase, and it is in this sentence a subject in the sentence. And then we have Kampung Pasir Gajah. So those are compound proper nouns, and they all consist of noun, noun, and noun. So 3 nouns in this compound. And in this, in the sentence, is used as the object of the preposition. And then we proceed to endangered terrapins. So endangered terrapins is the endangered is an adjective, and then terrapin is the noun. So adjective and noun. Then we have plural with the S, plural S. Yeah? And engaged terrapins is object of the verb. So we can proceed with the community empowerment program. So you find that the community empowerment program, you have the determiner, the, there, and with the three nouns, community, 1, empowerment, 2, program, 3. So we have 3 nouns and determiner. So determiner seems to be a good signifier that is a noun. Yeah? So when you see a determiner, an article, the probably is a noun. And it functions as the subject of the sentence. A year is also a noun because it has the determiner a. Yeah? Sewing classes, so you have verb happening with the noun. But if you look at the context of the sentence, it's not a verb, it's actually a noun. So you find that you have the ing ending for sewing, and then classes you have the plural as marker. So that confirms that the whole construction is a noun, and it is the object of the verb. We proceed to the next example, a small portion of the money. We find that in this example, portion is the noun, right? A small portion of the noun. Small portion of the money. I would think that actually of the money is the head of the money is the head of the noun. So the money, but the money is part of the prepositions of the money, and then portion is like a classifier, small is an adjective, and you find that this is a quite complex noun phrase. You have the noun, which is a small portion, and then of the money is the complement of the preposition, complement of the noun. For example, you can't say a small portion, right? You have to say a small portion of the money. So the of the money is a complement. It has to happen. Otherwise, a small portion, you just say a small portion, is not meaningful. Huh? So in this instance, this is a complex noun phrase. You have the noun and the prepositional complement. And then we have an example of the terrapin and turtle conservation project. So this is where we have the noun phrase and a coordinate and another noun phrase. So each, for example, the terrapin, determiner noun, and turtle conversation project, which is another compound. So in this we have a noun phrase, a conjunction, and a noun phrase, a conjunction, and another compound noun phrase. And this is the object of preposition. Lotion making classes. By the fact that classes is the head, and it has a plural s, so in this so it makes it a noun phrase. Not all the women, where here you find the noun happening with the negation, the quantifier all, and the determiner. So from this tabulation of characteristics of nouns in English, you find that noun is quite robust in that sense, because it allows a lot of things to happen before it and after it. Yeah. So before the noun, you can find a determiner or a numeral or an adjective, some part, some like a verb, which is like a gerund, sewing just now, sewing classes. You can have a combination of a determinate, adjective, noun, and then you can have the noun with another noun with a conjunction in the middle. So these are all the elements happening with the noun. And then in terms of distribution, you find that they are mostly in the main slot in the sentence. So for example, this is a subject of the sentence, or it's the object of the sentence. And usually object of the sentence is object of the verb. It is the object of preposition. Okay, so these are the things. This is how nouns appear in sentences. Okay, so we proceed to the next slide, which is I actually this is an example of characteristics of nouns in Malay. Yeah, so I have the first example is satu kajian yang menyeluruh. So you have the satu is the numeral, kajian is the noun, and then you have a relative clause yang menyeluruh. Walaupun dia cakap satu kajian menyeluruh, sebenarnya satu kajian yang menyeluruh. So that's the subject. And then you have impact COVID-19, which is a noun phrase, a noun and noun. It's a compound noun, and this is object to the verb. Langkah baru, noun adjective. Wabak number 4 example is wabak berkenaan, which is noun determiner. And then you have Ketua Setiausaha Kementerian Pelancongan Kesenian dan Kebudayaan, which is a compound word, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, about 6 nouns with a conjunction there. And then we have semua penggerak industri. So semua is a quantifier, penggerak is a noun, and then industry is a noun. And then you find that for Malay, we have the affixation, which is the imbuhan. So we have semua penggerak seni, semua penggerak industri, peng in the prefix of the word penggerak is a nominal affix or prefix. So when you have pen, most probably it is a noun. So one of the indicator to say, oh, I'm a noun, because I use the prefix pen. Then you have you can have a coordination, a conjunction of nouns. For example, number 8, sektor perhotelan, penerbangan dan pengangkutan. So this is a listing of the different sectors. So you could have coordination. So it is a noun because it can be coordinated with other nouns. We will see this later why. It also has the prefix, prefix perhotelan, penerbangan and pengangkutan. So all these 3 prefixes are actually indicators that they are nouns. Okay. Then the example number 9, we're talking about pengguna atau pelancong domestik. So this is the same thing. You have a coordination, or atau, and then you have the prefix pen, prefix pel. So those are also indicators of affixation, nominal affixation. And then we have example 10, keadaan semasa. So we have keadaan is a noun, semasa is an adjective, and then you have the keadaan actually, keadaan, which is a circumfix. The circumfix keadaan is a very strong indicator that is a noun. And then you have perkara baru, which is normal. You have the noun and the adjective. Kerajaan, for example. So kerajaan is a word. The base word is raja. or the base or the root word is raja, and then you have the ke'an. So ke'an, as I said, is a strong indicator of nominal. And then bantuan selanjutnya, so bantuan is bantu plus an. So an is also a very strong indicator of nouns. So with Malay, you have the elements occurring with the noun, which signals that it is a noun. And then you have the affixation, which helps you to also use that to justify that it's a noun. In terms of distribution, similarly to English, you find that they function as subjects in sentences. They are objects to the verb, objects to the preposition. So these are the typical position in a sentence for nouns. Okay, so I hope you understand how we can identify nouns, and I think you've seen it. So for those of you, for the group that's doing noun, you probably have come across this. Yeah? So the next slide, I am actually giving you the summary of what is a noun. So what is a summary? It can be preceded by determiner, the murder, for example. It can be preceded by the adjective, the horrific murder. So horrific is the adjective. It can combine with the preposition, about science in Rome. In prepositional phrase, that's the only combination. You have the preposition, you have the noun. Okay, and then nouns can be pluralized. You can have the s as part of the word, the en as part of the plural, irregular form. A noun can be substituted by a pronoun. Yeah. So, for example, you say, "I bought the book written by Noam Chomsky," and then it is very expensive. So it is a pronoun. So it refers back to the antecedent, the book by Noam Chomsky. Okay. It can be an answer to what. So we say, "What are you doing?" What are you doing? What are you doing? I need to change that. Not what, but who. Who question. So who are you talking to? Mom. Who are you watching? Who are you watching? A certain actor or actress, yeah? Robert Redford, for example. It can take another summary is that nouns can take, in English, apostrophe s to indicate possession. It can complete the phrase, they have no money. So they have no money, no with the noun. It can be sorted in the clef construction, which is it was true that it rained. It is true that, yeah. So those are the summaries for the nouns. Now we go to the next parts of speech, which is the verbs. So in the next slide is an example of newspaper piece of news, and this is where I highlighted the verbs. So in Malay, you can see the bolded ones, melihat, memperkenal, mendepani, dibentang, berkata, membabitkan, diadakan, bertujuan, mengenal pasti, diambil, mengambil kira, jumpa. This is in speech. Kita akan jumpa sekali lagi. Jumpa is a verb. dikemukakan, maklumkan, dipertimbangkan. So as you can see, as with the nouns, the verbs are also being assisted, signaled by the affixation. So there are certain affixation that are prone to be verbal markers. Yeah. So as you can see from the example, you have men. Men is a very typical verbal prefix. Memperkenal, memper is another one. D is a very classic verb marker, which is for passive, isn't it? Berkata, ber is not as many as men and D, but ber still is a verbal marker, verbal prefix. And then for things like jumpa, although it doesn't have a prefix, but it can be assumed that it is berjumpa, you know? Because in speech we always try to simplify due to the context, the deep context that is inherent when we speak. So we always say, kita akan jumpa sekali lagi. But in actual fact, to be formal, you have to say, kita akan berjumpa sekali lagi. But this is quoting from the person that they interviewed, so the person used jumpa. But berjumpa, it still has the prefix, which I call a zero prefix, because the meaning of ber is still there, although it's not used, physically it's not used. So I assume that the meaning is there, therefore it's a zero prefix, right? And I think we've discussed about identification of morphemes and zero prefix and overt prefix in year 1, I think. Okay, so we go. Then I give you an example in Malay. As you can see, I've tabulated melihat dan memperkenal, so it's a V, coordinated V, with the prefixes me, mem, per. And then you have mendepani, which is another verb, meni. Akan dibentang, so you have the D auxiliary, you have the D passive, yeah. Bertujuan mengenal pasti, so ber as a prefix and men as a prefix of mengenal pasti, diambil, and it's about the same. You can have diperkan, yeah? So these are examples of verbs in Malay. In English, the same news piece that I use for nouns, I'm putting it again on the slide, the next slide. But in this at this point, I want to show you the verbs. So what are the verbs? So is turning is a verb, to save is a verb, started, was born, organizing, contributed. Okay, so we go to the next slide. I have analyzed it according to their occurrence with other elements and also their distribution. So you can see that verbs can happen, for example, is turning. So when it is turning, you have turning the verb. So is a be form of the verb of the auxiliary. Yeah. So be. You can have to save, which is infinitive to with the verb. So the be and the infinitive to, the be form of the verb, is, was, are, were, are very strong indicator that that's a verb. A verb is coming after it. To is also another infinitive to, will have the verb. Okay, and then you have said with the verb and the past tense ed, started, past tense ed. What's missing? You have what is missing. Is the be form. Was a program. So was a program, was here is a copula. How come it's a copula? It's a copula when there's no verb. Right. So when you say was a program is a noun, and this is a verb phrase. Yeah. So when you have a noun and you have is or was a noun, was noun, then was becomes copula. Was becomes a verb, although not as strong as some verbs, but it is a copular verb. It is a verb, or some people say it's a partial verb. Then you have started making, which number 8. Started making is a verb, I would say. 2 verbs being used. And you have the ed, past tense, and the ing, making. And then the rest are the same, except for wanted to make lotion. It's also another V2V. Wanted to make lotion, V2V. So when you look at the occurrence of the verb, there are certain elements that happen with the verb. The inflection, the derivation of the verb helps in identifying the verb. In terms of distribution, the verbs it always occur after the subject. Always occur after the subject. Okay. So we proceed. So I give you a summary of what is a verb. So verbs can be preceded by modal verbs: can, will, should. Yeah. Verbs can change to indicate temporal contrast. So you can have simple present tense, you can have past present tense, future present tense. Yeah? It can be modified by adverbials like very much, he very much enjoyed the play. Can combine with noun phrases, eats cakes, love their children. Can be substituted or by or linked to the verb pro form do. For example, you arrived late. Did you? So did refer back to arrive late. Or Bob runs, another example is Bob runs and so does Jill. So you have Bob runs and so does Jill. Does refer to the verb in the first part of the sentence. So does refer to runs. So in a sense, you can substitute do with to represent a sentence, represent a verb. For example, it's very boring to say Bob runs and Jill runs too. Can be done, but it's not very economical, again. So Bob runs and so and Jill runs too. Better to, because we understood what they're doing. They're running. Both of them are running. So we just say Bob runs and so does Jill. We don't have to repeat the verb. Verbs can undergo ellipsis. Ellipsis is dropping, deletion. So you say she will come and so will Bill. So will Bill. So will is an auxiliary, and then the verb is missing. But because of the context, we can understand that come is the verb. It's called deletion. Or in Malay we say adik nak tambah nasi dan abang nak juga. So abang nak juga, nak is an auxiliary, no verb. But we know fully well from context that it is nak nasi lah. Alright. So we come to the, I think, third category, which is the adjective. So the adjectives is a group of words which is not as huge as nouns or verbs. Yeah? So in this piece of write-up, is talking about someone who built a small house. Yeah? So you can see examples of adjective phrases. The White House. Warm and cozy feeling. So you find that adjectives always happens with a noun. Yeah? is practical. This is an example which is different from the the the, the first two examples. Is practical. So is practical is becomes a copula, and then practical is an adjective. So this is an example of a rather interesting example where we say it's a linking verb. Linking verb is and then you have less clutter, which is having the degree word less clutter. Then we have a simple life with the adjective and noun. Adjective simple, life is a noun. Small houses, adjective with a noun. Same thing. Then we have was inspired, which is basically like is practical just now. Very supportive. You have supportive is the adjective and very is the degree word. Okay. So these examples are from English. So I've actually analyzed it in this table, and we find that there are certain things that happens. It's a very fixed. Environment for preposition. So usually preposition is preceded by the determiner, and then the preposition. Sorry, the adjective. You have the determiner, the adjective, and the noun. So that's a very fixed combination context. Or you have an adjective being coordinated by another adjective, or you have the copula with the adjective. Okay. So the adjective can be part of a noun phrase in the distribution, can be part of a noun phrase. It can be a predicate, an adjectival predicate. So for example, is practical is an adjectival predicate. It's an adjective in a predicate position. You can coordinate the adjective. It can be within the noun. It can also be within the predicate. Yeah. So in that sense, it's quite interesting. So the next slide, I actually summarize the adjectives that it can occur between the determiner and the noun. It can combine with verbs like seem, is, be, appear, look. These are the perceptive verbs. For example, you say she looks beautiful. So looks beautiful. Beautiful is an adjective. She sounds amazing. So amazing is an adjective. Can be modified with degree words. So this is a very strong indicator of the fact that it's an adjective, because you can use a degree word. Yeah? So very clever, sangat pandai, sangat tinggi. It can be stacked in a series, means you can use adjectives, more than one adjective. So you can say cozy, comfy, blue sofa. Yeah? So cozy, comfy, blue. Cozy is an adjective, comfy is an adjective, blue is an adjective. So it's a stacking. It's a stacking of adjectives. Yeah? So you can use a lot of adjectives describing a noun, for example. The big, fat, slumpy, tall, attractive girl. So there's 6 adjectives, or 5 adjectives, and a noun. In English, you can actually add ly to the adjective, and it becomes an adverb. So, for example, kind, kindly, hope, hopefully. Yeah, you can have you can add a prefix un to adjectives to indicate negation. So unlock, unheard, unkept. Unkept. Okay, we go to the next category, parts of speech, which is preposition. So preposition or I should have the preposition. I have an example of the preposition used in the news that I've copied on the PowerPoint. So you have for housing, of RM 220,000, for affordable housing, for many low income, um, of the Kelang Valley. So the prepositions are pretty predictable, right? So the instances where preposition occurs is quite predictable, it's quite fixed in that sense. So let's look at their analysis, which is the next slide, which is for. So I've actually listed of for housing, of 220,000, for affordable housing, for many low-income families, of any housing projects. So all are having the same pattern. So which is preposition N. So preposition N is a very strong fixed instance of preposition. Where you have a preposition, it almost always have the noun, except for the second pattern where you have for building affordable housing. So in that instance, for is a preposition, building is a verb. It is actually the verb, not the noun. So in that instance, the pattern is preposition, verb, adjective, noun. So this is a very uncommon pattern that I found. So, but in the distribution, preposition always occurs in the preposition phrase. It's very predictable. So no problem with preposition. So you want to know whether it's a preposition, you look at the next element. If it's a noun, most probably it's a preposition. Especially if it talks about a reason or it talks about location. So we were looking at auxiliaries, and I took examples of auxiliaries from all the different pieces of news that I've shown you before. So in the slide which has the sample auxiliaries, you find that examples like is turning, which is auxiliary verb. What is missing, which is auxiliary verb also, the verb be. Akan dibentang, akan is an auxiliary. I have always loved tiny things. I have always, have is have, auxiliary always. Oh no, have is have, and always is always in a verb. I need to change that. Or I could do it. Could is an auxiliary, verb is do. So I could do it. Alright? So this is an example of auxiliary. And then I give you the summary of characteristics of auxiliary verbs. So we say can precede the main verb. So you have the main verb. Running is the auxiliary. Can change their form to indicate temporal contrast. So in English, for example, you have, has, have is present, has is perfect tense, had is past, can is present, could is present, can occur before the noun phrase in question. For example, is she awake? Is she awake? So is the auxiliary because awake, but the is being separated by she. Is she awake? So the element which comes in a yes no question, like is she awake, the is an auxiliary. It has been subject verb inversion, because the sentence would be she is awake, right? We start with she is awake, subject, verb. And then when you want to question that, you say, is she awake? So the is goes to the front, the verb stays at its place, but in the middle is the subject. In English, you can have the contraction, apostrophe and T to indicate the negation, like cannot, would not. Can act as a proform, substituting for or linking back to the main verb. Has the doctor left? She has. So left. She has what? She has left. Are you enjoying yourself? Yes, I am. I don't have to say I am enjoying myself. Yes, I am. So it can act as a proform. Has as a proform. Am as a proform. Okay, so Sarah, I gave on the slide, Sarah put glass of juice, or juice go over book, wet, alright? This might be a sample of utterances by someone who has language impairment. So, how would we explain what is the category parts of speech for wet? Okay, so it depends on the meaning. So if you say my book got wet, if it means juice go over book and then wet, right? So if it is wet is an adjective. If you say my book got wet, so wet is the adjectival predicate, got is the verb, right? It can be a verb when you say the juice wetted my book. So it's a verb, wet, wetted my book. Or it could be a noun. My book got in the wet, right? My book got in the wet. So in that number 3, wet is a noun. Because, why is it a noun? Because before it is the determiner. So when you have a determiner, obviously confirm wet is a noun, right? Another evidence that is a noun is that you have the preposition, isn't it? Got. Sorry, in. In is a preposition. So in the wet. So when you have in, the element following in has to be a noun phrase. And of course, because it already has the determiner. So wet is a noun. And then number 4, if wet was only adjective used in the language sample, then it probably is not an adjective. So it depends. It sometimes if it's regularly used by the person, then it becomes the meaning gets more regularized, right? But if in the language sample you only find one instance of that use of the word, then probably it's just an occurrence which is not a habit, language habit. So when we go through the language sample, we try to find instances of examples that occur more than once. So these are the examples of, this example is an example of an utterance from a language sample in which you need to know, you need to have the skill of using the characteristics of parts of speech when you want to analyze the word. Is it a noun? Is it an adjective? Is it a verb? It depends on the context and depends on the use. Depends on the element that occurs with that particular word. And it also depends on the distribution. So all the examples that I gave you, use that. Use the evidence of the elements occurring with that particular word, which are the neighbors. The other one is we look at the distribution in the sentence. If it happens in a subject position, most probably it's a noun. Object to the verb is probably is a noun. Object to the preposition is probably a noun. So we kind of know that, we use that all the time, but sometimes when we think like meta-linguistic, like what is it, how do I justify it, then it gets a bit hard. But just fall back to your language competence and language use, and you can see the behavior coming out from these words. Yeah. Then the next slide, which is actually I think the last slide. The next slide I show you two language sample. Alright, no, it's a language sample by a kid with aphasia. Aphasia is trauma to the brain, either trauma to the brain or there's a stroke. Yeah, it impacts the language side of the brain. So this is a kid with aphasia, and we look at the language sample. 6 months post onset. That means when the stroke or trauma appears, and then 6 months after that. Okay, so then the boy says, "There a dog, meat in mouth. Went home and a plank. His flexion. Thought another dog and meat. Opened his mouth. Meat gone." So from here we have to figure out what is the boy saying. In order to get at what is the boy saying, we need to get the parts of speech, parts of speech of the words that he's using. So there a dog, what's missing is the verb. There is a dog, right? And a dog is a noun because there's a particle, it's an article there. And then meat in mouth, the meat is in the mouth. Yeah. Went home and a plank. So the dog went home, and there was a plank probably over the pond, and the dog saw his reflection. Okay, and then when he saw himself in the pond, he thought that it was another dog with the bone, actually, the bone or the meat. Then he wanted to get at the meat that's being that the other dog has. So in order to get to jump to lunge at it, he opened his mouth, and then because he opened his mouth, the meat or the bone fell off his mouth and fell into the pond, and therefore the meat is gone. So so when we are doing the language sample, we need to know what is the word category. Yeah. And then 12 months onset means 12 months after he had the trauma, for example. Yeah? And he was 7 years old then. Then you can see the words that he used. The sentences are getting more elements, having more elements, and then it's easier to understand what he's trying to say. So he's saying, there was a dog with some piece of meat. He went across a river. Thought he saw another dog with meat in his mouth. So he snapped. The meat fell out from his mouth, dropped into the pond. So you can see that in the 6 months post-onset, he's being very telegraphic, isn't it? But a year after that, he regained his language competence, and he's able to use more words using was, which is a copular. A copular. Was is a copular that he could use at 1 year post-stroke, but not 6 months post-stroke. You can see that he says, there, a dog. But in a year after that, he could say, there was a dog. So then was is a copula, because there's no other verb. There's only the noun phrase. So was is a copula. Some piece of meat. So in the earlier sample, just meat in mouth. But now he can say some piece of meat. So he can say the quantifier, he can say some, he can say the classifier, piece, and he could also have the preposition of. Okay, and he could tell that about the dog going home and going and passing by a river. In the previous earlier sample, he just said went home and a plank. Now he can say he went across a river, thought he saw another dog. Yeah? So he went across the river is a more complete sentence compared to went home and plank. Alright, so that in the earlier sample it could be quite confusing, but in the later sample he was able to express the meaning of in the logical progression of the story. Thought another dog and meat. So if you take that sentence out of context, it gets very confusing. Thought another dog and meat, but in his later sample he said thought he saw another dog with meat in his mouth. Alright, so basically the use of the ability to determine the parts of speech in morphology is the ability to look at words and categorize the parts of speech and understand how it's being used in a sentence. And this ability is it comes in handy when you're supposed to analyze a language sample. You have a language sample and you want to analyze it, so you need to know the words that the child or the adult is using and what is the parts of speech of these words. Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective? You're able to compare between the categories of words used. Remember I told you you can use the type token ratio, where you can look at the types of words used, and the token is the frequency of use in the sample. So a certain value of a type token ratio gives a certain information about the word use. Alright, and then and you can use this to if you look at the language sample, you can see, like for example, if you look at the boy when he was 6 months post-stroke, you can actually see, if you analyze, when you analyze his language sample, you will come with a conclusion that he seems to use a lot of nouns compared to verbs, right? So probably the attending speech therapist then set out to improve on his verb, and you can see 1 year after that his verbs, he has developed or regained back his verbs, and he could actually use the verb, even a copular verb like was, which is quite difficult because you're very used to activity verbs like running, reading, eating, but copular verbs are very abstract. So no surprise that he couldn't use it 6 months before. Okay, so the fact that he can use it, so that means he's pretty okay. His prognosis for language recovery is quite good. So our lecture today has been regarding word use, category of speech, category of words, and at the end I showed you how your knowledge and ability to determine the word category can help in language sample, analyzing language sample. Okay, so for the next time, maybe all the groups, can you please make me a video of your presentation, and then I can look at it and give you comments, and we'll see how the situation proceed with the coronavirus situation. So I think with that, I end the lecture. Thank you so much for listening to my lecture, and should you have any questions, you can put it up in the iFolio, and maybe we can do some discussion over there too. Okay, so a very good evening to all of you, and